So please don't invite her for ratings to call me the N-word, because that's basically what it's...
The child the word? It is my own business. You call him a...
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Sir, you're not beating the allegations of the low impulse control and the quick jump to violence.
This is Lily Gaddis. She's an open racist and a proud white nationalist. Recently, she was on the Piers Morgan Show along with Marc Lamont Hill, a former CNN pundit, and Myron Gaines, who you may know from the Fresh and Fit podcast. During the panel, though, what really kind of stood out to me was just the arguments that Myron and Lily were using. They were the same arguments that people have been using since I was in high school. Back then, I wish I had someone to coach me through these arguments, so I thought this could be fun. I think we should go through Marc's arguments and see where he hit the nail on the head and where maybe he could have hit a bit harder. Let's get into it.
Is that how you want people to leave this panel debate? We're thinking of you as a disgusting racist?
I don't really care what people think about me. As long as you care about what people think about you, you have no power and you lose your country. What I care about is freedom of speech. And if you're not allowed to say the most offensive things in this country, you do not have freedom of speech. I don't care what anybody says. So that's the main crux of this situation. That's what I care about with this situation. It is, we have lived for far too long in a country where you can have your life destroyed. And people say, oh, she doesn't need this money. Her life's destroyed, by the way. She'll never be able to get another job. She's got children to have to support. And I don't want to live in a country where you can say an inappropriate, rude thing, which, by the way, black people can say things to white people all the time and they never get canceled. There's no backlashing about this. I want to live in a country where people are allowed to say what they want unashamedly. And you will
well, go
not
on then,
have
say it. Say
you
the
will
M-
not have
Go on, say,
speech.
go on. Say the M word, go on.
No.
Hang on.
No. I don't want you to invite this woman to say a racially harmful term in front of me, because I'm the only on here. So if she says it, I'm the victim of it. So please don't invite her for ratings to call me the N-word, because that's basically what it's going to be. There's a bunch of white people up here, you and one Uncle Tom on the left here, and to ask her to say the N-word while I'm here is ridiculous. You would not sit here with a Jewish person and say, please use a Jewish slur in front of this Jewish. It's ridiculous. I understand you don't have any bad intent, Piers. I understand what you're trying to do, but we already know she's racist, and I don't want to invite a racial harm to me.
I hear you.
Okay, so just to give you a bit of context here, she's referring to Shiloh Hendrix. That's the woman who got caught calling the small autistic child the M-word at the park. And not just once, mind you. When she got caught on camera, she doubled down on it and she called the person recording the video the M-word repeatedly as well, as you can see in the footage here.
Did you call him the child? Did you call the child the word? It is my own business. You call him a... Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again? Okay.
So Lily is arguing here that the fact that Shiloh can't find a job is evidence that free speech is on the decline in America. So in short, I think that's an incredibly inaccurate understanding of how freedom of speech works in this country. Now, despite the egregiousness of Shiloh's actions, she was not arrested, she was not fined, the government did not touch her. Actually, what she did at the park comes dangerously close to something known as fighting words. Fighting words is a category of speech that's not protected by the First Amendment, and essentially it's inflammatory speech that it's so inflammatory that it's likely to cause an altercation or a fight. But even then, and I do think what she did definitely comes very close to that, no one's trying to cuff her, no one's trying to arrest her, and anyone who's even considered doing legal charges against her, most lawyers are saying there's not a chance that could stand. Now, regarding her corporate life, that's a whole different thing. By and large, if you're in the private sector, your employer can fire you for saying or doing something that they do not want associated with the company. There are a few aspects of protected speech, such as like whistleblowing and things like that, but by and large, most things are not covered by the First Amendment when it comes to your corporate life. She goes on to say that black people are allowed to say whatever they want with impunity, to which I would bring up the case of Colin Kaepernick, where obviously he was punished for speaking his mind about racism. Now, mind you, he did nothing nearly as egregious as Hendrix, but the league still decided to blackball him, which technically was well within the league's rights. All that's to say is that when people say that Shiloh is being silenced or punished, that's not quite the case. She's just facing the consequences of her actions. But we also need to remember that these are social consequences and not consequences brought about by the government. And regarding her employment, no one owes her a paycheck. If her actions are costing her employers business and sponsors and general peace of mind, they're gonna walk. That's not cancel culture. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. That's just good old capitalism. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Either everyone gets to be tribal or nobody does. Why would you retweet that?
Because I agree with it. Because we have to fight fire with fire. I mean, at some point, why are
nobody does?
Why are Jewish people allowed to be tribal? Why are black people allowed to be tribal? But as soon as white people stand up for themselves, we're labeled a racist.
Talking about tribalism, when you were mentioning Nick Fuentes' tweet, here's the thing. Black people could be as tribal as they want to be. You have people like Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Umar Johnson running around about black power and marry black women and keep it in the hood and all this other stuff. But if white people assemble and say, you know what, white power, we need to keep our nation white, they're immediately ostracized and labeled as supremacists, and they get banned off every single platform. I find that interesting. And
the bigger issue here, I think, is that, you know, this idea of equating of one side to the other side often loses track of this issue of power. To use his example, when black people stand up and say, hey, let's build our own stuff, hey, let's have a black power movement, that is not the same as a white power. I'll let you speak uninterrupted. Let me finish, please. My Sudanese brother. So when a black person says, hey, let's preserve our culture, I have no problem with Italians or Irish people or anyone else saying let's preserve our culture. But when we don't talk about ethnicity, but actual race, when white people say let's preserve whiteness, it's an exclusionary practice. It's about preserving laws and practices and tactics that do harm to other people. A black power movement was about opening stores and building businesses. A white power movement was a white power. That's the giga. A white power movement was about something very, 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 very different. A white power movement included lynchings and included Ku Klux Klan, etc.
So I think Mark really hit the nail on the head on this one here. On the surface, it may sound like a fair question, but in reality, the idea and the concept of white unity is a bit of a misnomer. When black people or Jewish people talk about unity, it's usually in response to being treated like second-class citizens. Essentially, it's a refusal to be seen as less than. White unity, on the other hand, has not historically been about equality. More often than not, it's about refusing to be on the same level as everybody else. And really, the core difference between the two is that one is about liberation and the other is about preserving dominance. Black unity is something that evolved out of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and repeatedly being told that we don't matter. Black pride was our way of saying, yes, we do matter. Similarly, Jewish unity is how the Jews survived things like the pogroms and the Holocaust in general. So for blacks and Jews, the unity usually comes about as a survival tactic. But for white unity, that usually only comes about as a resistance to change and resistance to progress. For Brown versus Board of Education, white unity came in the form of mobs and segregation academies. For the Civil Rights Act, white unity came in the form of Nixon and the silent majority. And then now in current day with programs like DEI and affirmative action, again, we see more white unity in the sense of pushing back against these programs because apparently they're systemically racist against white people. The funny part of that being is that white people have disproportionately benefited from programs like DEI and affirmative action, specifically white women like Shiloh Hendrix and Lily Gaddis. Now, let me just say, no one's saying that white people can't be proud of their ethnicity or their heritage or anything like that. In fact, I went to an Irish festival last week or a few weeks ago and I had a great time. But when you organize around whiteness, which is specifically a label that was created to kind of exclude everybody else, you really need to stop and ask, what am I fighting for exactly? Because black pride, Jewish pride, etc., those are usually about fighting to be seen as equal, whereas white pride is usually about the opposite. So, moving on.
Hang on. I called, just to be clear, I called you a racist because you openly, proudly admitted you're a racist. So it wasn't a question of exposing you or pointing my finger or trying to get this out of you. You proudly sat there, bold as brass, and said, yeah, I use the N-word all the time against black people. I'm a racist and I'm proud of it. That's what you did.
Racism is just having a preference. I prefer not to live around black people. I prefer not to live in a country where white people in our country are disproportionately attacked by black people. Where in my country, you can have an Austin Metcalf where he asks a guy to leave and he gets stabbed in the heart. I prefer that. That's a preference. How is that a bad thing? How is that not just a preference?
Because you've literally made black people sound lesser humans. You don't want to live around them. You want to use the N-word in relation to them, a word that you know causes that community unbelievable offense.
Is that my fault? If they have bad behavior, if they want to act in a certain way, if I have to cross the street and be afraid that maybe because of the crime statistics that are very real, by the way, is that my fault or is that their fault for having bad behavior?
That's mind-boggling to me for multiple reasons. I mean, we're talking about bad behavior. You know, we've never lynched you, we've never enslaved you, we've never done any of the deep-seated structural forms of injustice to white people that white people have done to black people, and yet to claim some kind of moral superiority in the midst of, and again, in the context of a conversation where a white woman is calling a 5-year-old autistic child the N-word, and I
think Mark nailed this one as well, but was probably a little bit limited on time and wasn't able to give an answer as detailed as he would have liked. And Lily, here again, similar to her misunderstanding of how free speech works, is working with a very inaccurate definition of racism. Preference is saying something like, Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man. That's a preference, and actually that's the correct opinion. But saying I avoid black people because of crime stats, that's not a preference. That's assigning a negative trait to an entire race of people based on race alone, which is racism. Now, I actually think this is probably the go-to argument against black people, so I want to try my best to prepare you for how to answer this question, regardless of if you're a black person yourself or just someone who hates racism. So here's the key thing to remember with this question, is that it's not actually a question, it's an implication. When people bring up the crime stats of black people, they're not asking in good faith. They're just not. They're implying that black people are inherently more violent. They're implying that there's something about our biological nature that makes us more prone to criminality. It has nothing to do with logic, nothing to do with statistics. It's about justifying their fear while remaining willfully ignorant about the history behind these statistics. Essentially, you need to remember that crime stats are not race stats. In general, there are several socioeconomic factors that lead to higher crime rates regardless of rate. Chief among those are poverty, health, housing, education, and institutional trust. Black, white, Latino, Asian, doesn't matter. You drop someone in a community that has low ratings in all these factors, yeah, there's going to be a high crime community. But here's the thing though, can you think of any group in America that has had these things systemically withheld for them for several generations and hundreds of years? Can you think of anybody? Any group? Whenever anyone brings this up, it always makes me think of the speech that Vice President Kamala gave a while back while she was running for president.
My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Essentially, all I'm saying is there's a reason why those things are the way they are, the stats that people like to reference so much, and those things are rooted in policy, not race. Policy as in a group of people intended to keep another group of people behind. And that's just the historical facts. And we're here now because of those policies. I think if you take a look at the fact that African immigrants have way lower criminality rates and way higher income rates than African Americans born here, I think that kind of proves that this is nurture and not nature. I think also like an interesting consideration is that the state with the most crime per capita is not Georgia, it's not Florida, but it's actually Alaska, which has barely any black people. And I think that's just kind of proof that crime really is a product of your environment, not your genetics, okay? Lastly, I want to move on to just one last thing here. During the panel, Lily was delusional enough to say this.
Now, what a real racist is, in my opinion, is seeing someone as less human. I'm a Christian. I believe everyone's created in God's image, so I don't see anyone as less human.
Then just a few days later, she had the audacity to say this about Mark on her channel.
Should we rewatch the chimp out? That was just so good. I loved the chimp out. That honestly made the whole thing. Where is it?
Harmful term in front of me.
And I don't want to live in a country where you can. I felt like saying, sir, you're not beating the allegations of the low impulse control and the quick jump to violence. You're definitely not beating the allegations. Yeah.
And really, on this point here, I just want to say, don't let these people fool you. They'll come out as blatant racists and then they'll hide behind the religion. Never be afraid to call out racism for what it is. Now, at the same time, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that Lily Gaddis, Shiloh Hendrix, Myron Gaines, they do not represent all white people. White people are not our enemy. Racists are. Like all people, white people are not a monolith. And automatically equating white people with racism is not going to help us out. It's just not. There's a future out there where all of us can live together and work together and thrive together in harmony. And that's a future that I am working towards. And I hope you'll join me on my crusade. But for now, I'm your host, Vermillion. Hope you have a productive week. If you were touched or triggered by anything I said, please let me know in the comments. I'm definitely open for debate. But in the meantime, remember that we live in the stories we tell ourselves. Until next time.